Hey, what's up, friends? This is Janet and Ryan coming to you from Bold Fit. And today I wanted to continue on the stress series that I wanted to talk more thoroughly through from that first video that I posted the other night. And Ryan is joining me in the discussion today. So the topic I wanted to cover today was pain and many different manifestations of pain and what it is from those different viewpoints, and why it's important to understand how to deal with pain. And looking at it from also not just a physical perspective, but also emotional, psychological, and social. Stress, as we've mentioned, is affecting people at greater intensities nowadays, just because there's so much more of the environment that has stressors in it, and trying to find a balance where you're not feeling the stress is also partly in ways trying to find a balance to not feel pain. So what is pain anyway, to start out with? Pain is anything that you're gonna feel when something hurts, on a very basic level, right? You jam your finger in the door, you bite your tongue, you kick something with your foot, like I have with my weights here. And
these are all examples that she does relatively regularly too. Jamming her finger, kicking something she's supposed to kick. That's
totally
daily.
Yeah. So and or even to a greater degree, getting into a car accident, suffering injuries that takes time, maybe months or years even, to recover from. And so those are things that we really just viscerally feel because there was an action that created it. But pain, so what happens is that your nervous system is affected by whatever that stressor might be, and then it's signaling a message to your brain telling you that there's pain there, and then your brain tells the rest of the body what's going on. So that's one part of it. But when people continue to experience pain for something that is long-term, in other words, if it's not necessarily, or maybe even related to an injury, but they continue to experience it over periods of time, that's when it becomes chronic pain. And like we talked about with chronic stress and the implications that it can have on your health, well, chronic pain is also in and of itself going to cause problems along the long run. And it's even something that, on a global scale, if you're looking to see what are the major health issues, global health issues around the world, chronic pain is actually near the top of it. It's somewhere estimated that 1 in 5 people, that's 1.5 billion people across the world, experience some form of chronic pain. And the prevalence is increasing with age. And so a lot of those factors, they could be related to, arthritis, which is inflammation in the joints, osteoporosis, when your bones are weakening, cancer. So a lot of these are non-communicable diseases. It's not like the infectious diseases that get spread. These are things that are arising, either some of it genetic and a lot of it environmental. So in the US specifically, there's over 50 million people that are suffering from some sort of chronic pain, and it's nearly like the number one thing that people seek medical attention for. But the issue on that side is that most often medical community wants to look at it from that perspective, in that one lens, and trying to find you treatments for that. And so medicines, obviously, or other kind of medicine or non-medicine related plans to try to address that. And medicine in and of itself is not always the answer. The opioid epidemic is an example where prescription painkillers were given to people for whatever the underlying cause was, and then people end up abusing because there's more going on than just having a migraine or stomach pain. And then we need to look at, okay, what are the other factors that are contributing to this? So in the new, more modern way of looking at things, you have to look at it from a medical perspective, a psychological perspective, and a social perspective. And as a person that has suffered chronic conditions, I can tell you that mental depression, emotional issues, disorders, all of those can have the side effect, if you want to call it that, of pain. And it's very real. And we still it's better nowadays that we are talking more about behavioral and mental health, but it's still a large problem of stigmatization. You can't just call your boss in the morning and tell them, oh, my depression's really bad today. I'm in a lot of pain. I don't think I'm going to be able to come in. Like, that's not something that most people would normally say. But it's very real if you say, I broke my foot, I have the flu, I have a cold. So in that sense, it's also not taken as seriously as it should. So, you can feel as a result, other things start to hurt from that pain. So from my end, I've had chronic depression since I was 17 when I first started to see a therapist. And in college, my freshman year, I developed irritable bowel syndrome. And I didn't know at that time what that was or what was causing it. So when I would come home from college, my mom would take me on just like all these different expeditions to see different doctors to find out what was wrong with my stomach. And I've been through the rigors, Ryan knows very well, as far as different tests and everything. I've had upper GI, I've done food testing, allergy testing, colonoscopy, which at my age is not normal testing to do, but they kind of want to attack it from all corners of what's happening in my body. And oftentimes it came back that there weren't like conclusive results, that they couldn't pinpoint and say like, okay, there's something happening here in your intestines or in your colon or whatever the case might be. So it can be very aggravating, because then what happens is your stomach then becomes like your second brain. So if you're thinking and you're under duress and stress, your stomach can start to hurt. And the opposite happens as well. Like, your stomach can hurt, and that can start to implicate how you feel mentally. And it can be very limiting to things that your normal way of life, whether it be working, whether it's your personal life, your home life. These things have really significant impacts on your health. So I feel like we need to talk about this in broader terms and accept it as something that is to be taken seriously. And so I was telling Ryan that, I also wanted to relay it back to fitness, because we're both fitness professionals and we both dealt with a lot of different kinds of pains. And how do we deal with that kind of pain, and then also on the more emotional side, social side. So Ryan, you and I we've been together for a while, right? Like 16, 17, 19 years. Ever since I've known Ryan, maybe not like at the very beginning couple of years, but he's always had chronic pain with his shoulders. And what was that, do you think, a result of?
Stupidity, largely stupidity. My take on pain, and clearly there's a whole spectrum of things we could talk about, but one of the hardest things to do is to not go hard, to dial things back. And I think a lot of my injuries, and then also the prolonged healing of them, has just been my stubbornness on wanting to push through. So you work out hard. If you're pushing yourself hard, pretty frequently, eventually you're either going to get injured or at a minimum find yourself absurdly sore, which is to say you're sort of on the brink of a strain, if not a more serious injury. And then you have to listen to yourself and not do that again for a little while, or at least find a way to work around it safely or to be active in a different way. Well, I think for a lot of people who do work out, not the folks who, oh, I hate going to the gym, the folks who love to work out, a lot of our problem is we will do it no matter what. Sick, hurt, whatever. And there's a risk to that. So my shoulders, for example, well, they're a very complicated joint. It's easy to injure them if you are not being thoughtful on what you're doing, especially if you're being repetitive. And guess what? I'm repetitive. I push through pain. I probably push through way too much pain, in fact, to the point of where I cause chronic issues. So, now with that said, and Janet mentioned this as well, the sort of what are the various means of ameliorating pain and its forms, and even a prophylactic means of approaching it so you avoid it altogether. And the first one I would say is train smart, program it. If you're going to go hard, great. Do it with correct form, do it thoughtfully, and don't do it every day. And don't do the same thing every day, every week. Find ways to mix it up. And sometimes it's that simple. And then there's simple things to add to it. So I'm here petting the cat a minute ago. There's actually a lot of research that suggests having a pet can in fact reduce some of the symptoms of stress, such as lowering blood pressure, better sleep, which is surprising considering that this particular cat crowds me out every night. So,
not just you.
But I mentioned that, not just you. But I mentioned that because there's a lot of things that you can do outside of the really sort of aggressive means, such as going all the way through physical therapy or medications that help pain, and they certainly can. But things that you can do that are not difficult, that you would actually want to do to ameliorate your painful situation. So I hand it back to you. The only thing else I'll say is I really enjoyed the fact I'm on this much lower seat. I kind of like her towering over me.
Doesn't happen that often. And I say that with Ryan first because while he had been developing those issues from a long period of time, it was hard to even for me to kind of relate to why it's there and why does it keep happening, and why, for the love of God, do you keep doing the same things to re-injure yourself? There's definitely psychological reasons behind that. Ryan is a person that definitely needs to have fitness in his life, and it's hard for him to break out of his regiment, which is right.
I'm right here.
Yes,
right now.
I know. And it's true. Like, we've had so many different arguments about this, like, stop the heavy lifting, try something else for a while. I'm always trying to preach, do yoga. It's, none of these things are going to take away from necessarily your strength, but they are going to be healthier for you in the long run. Pot calling kettle black.
Yeah.
So, I'll say from being a very active fitness person, even before becoming accredited and teaching anything, it does sometimes become a little bit of an addiction, or you become like a gym rat. You're going all the time, you're trying to press for new gains. You're doing torturous things to your body. You're not even sure if you're doing them.
Don't spoil my gains, okay?
You're not even sure, even if you practice the best form, and like Ryan trained me on weightlifting, and he's great. He's very knowledgeable. He reads a lot, but there were definitely things that, not to his fault, but just for me, I wasn't doing correctly and didn't even realize it.
Somewhere to my fault, I'm gonna be honest. There's a very heavy element to, once you are internally motivated to work out, it generally means you're gonna want to do it often. It means you're gonna want to usually push yourself pretty hard, and it also means you'll generally do the things you like the most often. which is to say that there are things that you should be doing in addition. So classic example. A lot of dudes like to bench press. Bench pressing is great, looks awesome, feels awesome, but it's not an entire package of mobility in terms of the muscle groups that it affects, as well as all the tangential muscles like everything in your shoulders and even your upper back. So if you're just bench pressing like crazy all the time and paying no attention to mobility, paying no attention to the accessory muscle groups, big surprise, you're probably going to get hurt. You're probably going to actually experience weakness in other areas, and eventually you're going to have real chronic issues. And the common one with bench press is a lot of guys with really strong chests. It actually pulls their shoulders forward and they slouch, so they sit more like this because of an overpowering amount of muscle development in the front. So that is one of the symptoms and one of the obvious things you might see.
So yeah, and when you're in your 20s and you're doing this, you might be able to get away with some things a lot more easily, definitely more easily than you do as you get older. So I would say like another big piece of not being completely knowledgeable on form was also just not giving myself enough rest, giving myself enough stretching and cool down, and realizing the importance of those things and why we need to have them as part of the whole fitness regime. It's not enough to just go in there and work hard and get that workout done. Your body, just like you need that warm up, you need that cool down. And that to me was just not something I'd ever focused on until later on. In my 30s, I was doing a lot of different kinds of training, group X training, and weightlifting, and not taking a lot of days off. And I would have soreness quite frequently, right? Because I'm always doing something, not giving myself enough rest. But when I started to ignore some of the soreness, especially in hamstrings, and hamstrings are a bitch of a muscle because they tighten very easily, it's hard to get them loose, and it's really like a daily thing that you almost have to work on. And hamstrings, when they're tightened, just wreak havoc on your whole body. They will start maybe in the hamstrings, but eventually it can flow down and definitely flow upwards, which is what happened to me. So I had a hamstring injury in my right leg, and I kept going, thinking that, it's just sore, it'll go away. But after a few months of it not going away and getting worse, in fact, I finally went to go see my doctor, and I had MRIs and x-rays done, and once again, much like with the IBS, they couldn't find anything necessarily conclusive. Maybe something more along like just some inflammation. So I was recommended for physical therapy, and we started to work on exercises related to hamstrings and the posterior chain, and understanding how to strengthen those parts of the body. Eventually I started to feel better in the hamstring, but I started to experience more lower back pain, and then that became mid back, and then eventually landing primarily in my cervical spine and my shoulders and my neck. And this was what I would call chronic pain that I still continue to have to this day. So I had to switch to a different kind of PT. First I went to occupational therapist. I was still working in an office at that time, so we talked about an occupational therapy or ergonomic settings and why that's important. Having your back supported, for example, number one thing, especially if you're sitting a lot all day. If you don't have your back supported and you don't have your feet flat on the floor and you're not able to sit all the way back in your chair, you're going to start to have back problems. And it's extremely common nowadays. If some people are lucky enough to have that environment where they can have the right placement of desk, computer, chair, everything, that's awesome. But for many of us, we're just not in that kind of situation for many different reasons. So I actually found through personal training how ubiquitous this problem has become. And so what naturally happens if you're not supported, your back gets tired. And as Ryan was describing with heavy lifting in the chest, same thing happens when your back's not supported. It weakens and you start to slump forward. So nowadays we're all like in this texting kind of position, typing on the computer position, and we have really large deficits and weaknesses in our backs as a result. So right around the scapular region, your shoulder blades primarily, is a great way to start on strengthening that part. And I then went to a spine specialist, and I had an awesome therapist for my spine recovery, and she literally made me go back to basics. And I realized how long I had been doing squats improperly, not engaging the right muscle groups. Glutes, for example. Glutes are critical to pretty much anything that you're doing. Core, and core not just being your abs and the six-pack. No, those things have just no actual functional purpose. Your core is really a combination of different muscles in this whole region that is supporting your upper and lower body. So here we had glutes and core, and obviously since I was having pain in my neck and shoulders, my upper body and spinal alignment. And those were the three main areas that we covered and started to relearn exercises. So working with her, and at that time was when I really started to get more into yoga as a means to initially start just stretching, finding the poses that would help me stretch after a workout, but then eventually just letting it become part of my overall fitness style. I wanted to keep going further into it, and it taught me so much about how to connect that mind and body together. And again, this is a term that can be easily just bounced around and not have a lot of meaning, but it really, there is absolutely, and this is not just from a mental state of mind, it's a very physical thing, where you learn to connect with your breath, very important, especially when you're doing any type of exercising, and how using that breathing can help you connect to different parts of your body, where you can actually physically feel those areas that are affected, and you can concentrate on those areas to get them loosened up. And that was one of the just first amazing lessons I learned from taking yoga, and then becoming a practice of it now to this day for over 4 years. But I had to really sit back and rethink how I do things and exercise. And one thing that I find a lot, and I talk about this incessantly, my students, my clients, all the time, is knowing the difference between when you're in pain, when you're working out or doing something physically active, versus discomfort and muscle tension. So if you're of mind and body, from knowing what was the old adage in the 80s, no pain, no gain, that was a very bodybuilding mentality, and not just in bodybuilding, it flowed throughout the fitness industry, right? Because if you weren't feeling, I guess, pain, then you weren't working hard enough.
It didn't count.
Right. Well, turns out that's not a good thing. Pain is very distinctive from feeling discomfort and muscle tension. Pain is, again, your body reacting to a certain stressor, right? The nervous system signaling the brain signaling the body that you're actually something is not right. It's a red flag. And that should be a red flag to stop what you're doing, no matter what. No matter how experienced you are, how flexible you are, if you feel something is not right, come out of it and then realign or assess what's happening. Now, muscle tension and discomfort, yes, you will feel that when you're working out. And again, this is where mind and body connection become really important, I think, because you're going to be put into situations, let's say spinning. In spinning, a lot of people talk about how difficult it is because of the fact that it is such a cardio intense exercise, and your brain becomes really important there to help kind of like get you through those challenging moments. Now, you can always play with the intensity to increase or decrease, but I'm telling students to challenge themselves every time they're on the bike by coming just a little bit out of their comfort zones. And it doesn't mean like, you know, turning it way up and like going for 4 minutes at that where you barely can sustain anything. No, like take it a little bit, maybe a few seconds longer, maybe 10 seconds longer, whatever the case may be. You know, do these things in steps, and that way your brain acclimates really well to understanding where your thresholds are and how you can safely push above them and where you need to back down. And that's why I always say it's really critical to listen to your body. And a lot of it is always up here too. And your body will actually keep going when your brain will come out, or your mind will give out first. So you can't do this without those two things connecting. The other thing that is really important is saying yes. You're going to feel, you know, when you work certain muscles, you're shocking your body, right? You're tearing down the tissue of that muscle, and it's going to need to be rebuilt so that it becomes stronger. And that's the whole, you know, focus behind strength training, right? Building better, stronger muscles, stronger bones, all of those things. Now, soreness is a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, right? So if you're experiencing soreness to the point where your mobility is very restricted, you might have pushed it too far. So this is like the things where we're like, yeah, my body's telling me it's too much, and then we keep going, and then we run into these issues of injuries and overtraining. But you don't want to have your mobility restricted that much, and if so, you need to back off, let your body recover. And eventually it will pass, and then you can, you know, go back and push harder again. But that's the thing. There's a thing called recovery and rest. And let me just tell you, this is my PSA all the time. As soon as we finish classes, you know, we get into the cool down stages. I talk a lot about why it's important to cool down, but then the most important is like, please recover, especially since a lot of the workouts that we do are high intensity. Your body needs to rest. That doesn't mean don't exercise. That means doing something maybe lower intensity. Lower intensity can be a lot of different things. Going for a walk, doing some household cleaning, maybe doing some very light cardio. But you know, going back to back hit workouts and not giving your body the rest is a recipe for disaster. It's overtraining, right? What happens when you overtrain?
Well, so think about it. Your body can only repair itself so quickly, right? So overtraining, I mean, there's a lot of different symptoms. I mean, honestly, one of the common ones is you suddenly feel sick and tired, and you don't feel like you, no matter what you're doing, even if you're just sitting around the house, you feel off. Your heart rate doesn't seem to want to slow down. Chronically dehydrated. But, you know, beyond that, the fact is overtraining is basically the shortest path to an injury or multiple injuries. So listen to yourself. I mean, being sore is awesome if it's the right amount. If it goes away in a couple days and you don't feel like an injury is sort of sitting on the back end of it, great. Especially when you do something the first time or do something hard, you're gonna probably get sore, and that's okay. But yes, if soreness is super intense and lasts for days and days and days, that's your body telling you something. It's time to just be cool and back off. And definitely also think about differentiating soreness from injured. Right. So, you know, oh, my bicep is sore because I had a very strenuous arm day, versus my bicep is burning, or it feels like maybe even like electrical, like a pinching. That's an injury. So be thoughtful and listen to yourself. Differentiate the two.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, you know, stay on the side of caution. If something doesn't go away within a few days, then, you know, maybe you might need to see a doctor and just, you know, see if there might be something more to it than just being sore. the other thing, which overtraining syndrome is a real thing, and it can lead to so many different issues with your body. Talking about stress and pain again. So just quickly coming back to that, when you do these type of hard workouts, your cortisol levels are elevated, and that's all for a good reason, right? That fight or flight response. And in that short term, it's meant to do what it's supposed to do to help you get through that challenging period, and then you need to recover and rest. But if you're continuously in a loop, you're a gym rat, you're a cardio junkie, whatever the case may be, your cortisol levels will stay elevated, and that hormonal effect on your body will start to, you'll see symptoms of fatigue, stress, increased loss of appetite, dehydration, headaches. I mean, the list can go on of different symptoms you're going to feel. And there's more exercise is not the answer. It's true. I see this all the time where people are like, I have to, this is what relaxes me, this is what relieves my stress. Okay, yes, there's a healthy way of that, and then there's an unhealthy way of that. And I would encourage people to just take that time and figure out how you're feeling afterwards to see if you need to take a break or not. Especially though, if you do anything with high intensity, I would definitely say give yourself at least a day break before coming back to it. And it's not meant to be, like Ryan was saying, these are not meant to be done every day. 2-3 times a week at max. After, in addition to that, resistance training, aerobic steady state training, all of those things are needed just as much. HIIT is meant to be quick, efficient, help you get a stronger aerobic base, but it's not meant to be an everyday thing. So there are some programs out there that like to encourage doing things at a high intensity level every day, push through pain. And I guess our message is, listen to your body and be safe.
Recover.
And that's one thing I very guilty of, and sometimes it's just part of the lifestyle, but at the same time, I don't want to go back to having that same hamstring injury. I don't want to have all day long, every day, my neck and my shoulders hurting.
So this seems like a really good place to sort of wrap it up. Again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. As always, we enjoy talking to you guys. If you have any questions, please let us know. Post them in the comments below. Also,
share experiences.
Yep. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you know. Tell us what you're doing. And if anyone wants a cat out there, we can make that happen. We've got way too many. I'll give you the one that was on my lap before if you like. She's still in the room.
Very unstressful petting, right?
Very.
All right, friends, take care. Peace.